Lotus is about to start delivering their 2024 electric SUV called the Lotus Eletre. And in this video, we're going to talk about this car. We're going to have a look at some of the spec and tech and the design, because I don't think that this is the direction that Lotus should be taking when it comes to this design of this thing. It's not a bad design, but I just don't think it's Lotus, and I'm going to let you know exactly why, give you my reasons why when we jump into Photoshop and have a look at this from a front, side, rear view and the interior. But first of all, let's have a look at this article from Car and Driver, and of course I'm gonna link this down in the description if you want to go and read the whole thing. So Geely Group purchased a controlling stake in Lotus in 2017, and they want to sell a lot more Lotuses globally. They have a goal of selling 100,000 cars by 2028. And note that it took 70 years for Lotus to make its first 100,000th car. Geely needs Lotus to offer more than sports cars for twisty roads. And this is the problem globally with today's market, that I do understand that companies, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, they all need to make an SUV to bring in that money and that dough to continue to build the cars that we are used to seeing them building historically. And the same goes for Lotus. But at the same time, it's about this design that doesn't feel right to me. More on that when we jump into Photoshop. You do have a two-motor all-wheel drive 4-door, and that's their Geely's strategy to start selling more Lotuses, is this Eletre. It's a big machine, a couple inches shorter than the Lamborghini Urus, and funny that they mentioned Lamborghini Urus here, because I'm gonna mention that later in the video as well. About the same length as a Honda Pilot. There's no piped-in synthetic noise in this car, and the car's active road noise cancellation works so well in concert with the strictly managed airflow around the car. It's a very slippery car, this thing. It has a drag coefficient of 0.26, which is absolutely incredible for an SUV. It comes in 3 different trim levels, all with 2 motors and 109 kWh lithium-ion battery pack capable of charging at up to 350 kilowatts and offering an estimated range that, once the EPA slaps their label on it, should be around 260 miles for the most potent variant and 315 miles for the more civilized version. Even the base electric comes standard with adaptive air springs, 22-inch wheels, 4-zone climate control, a head-up display, and wireless phone mirroring. The power output is said to be 603 horsepower and 523 pound-feet of torque for the 2 lower trim levels. If you want to bump that up a little bit, you go for the Eletre R, which puts out 905 horsepower and also adds a 2-wheel transmission similar to what we have in the Porsche Taycan, for example. So this person who writes this article says that it felt heavier than necessary, and that's not something that you want to hear when it comes to a Lotus. The driver faces a 12.6-inch digital instrument cluster with a head-up display, and the center touchscreen infotainment screen is 15.1 inches. You do have some physical controls, which is great in the interior. For example, in this case, for the climate control settings, which is fantastic. The Eletre pulls hard to the EV side. It's very comfortable, well optioned and elegant, and it's also fast, but even Lotus hasn't figured out how to make an SUV feel light and simple just yet. And that's why I think Lotus is too early to jumping into building a big SUV, because that is so far from their core identity. So what I would want to see here instead would be a hybrid version of this that still has a lot more Lotus DNA in its styling. And that's another problem with this car that I think Lotus could have done differently. So let's have a look at this design here. So let's start up top with the design sketches up top. So as you know, Lotus is all about lightness. It's supposed to be a light car, and it's supposed to look like a light car. That's what Lotus is all about. And it doesn't matter if you're gonna design an SUV like this, or if you're making a weekend race car. If it is a Lotus, I don't want to go away from the lightness, because that is the core essence of what this brand is all about. So these sketches, I think these sketches look great. I'm not a huge fan of this front end, and I'm gonna let you know why in just a couple of seconds here. And as you can see, we do have the headlights being integrated in the bumper, and then we have the daytime run light up here on the hood. This is a trend that I hope is gonna go away pretty soon, because I'm not a huge fan of the integration in most of the cases when you have this set up with the headlight. As you can see in this real version down here, you can see the headlights just hiding in this big black hole, and then you have the daytime run lights up here. So what I think about this design is I don't see any Lotus in the front end of this car. This could be, and I'm going to show you an example later that's probably going to shock you just how similar this is to some of these generic Chinese SUV EVs. And this might as well be one of those cars if it wasn't for some of this aerodynamic that we have in the Eletre specifically. And we also have an active rear spoiler in the back, which I don't think the Chinese SUV EVs have. And then we have this very interesting pattern at the lower section. This is getting a little too fancy for me. This is a Lotus. I don't want to have this BMW styling that might suit a BMW, but this fancy pattern that we have in the lower section, I don't know why they added this onto a Lotus. It's supposed to be simple and straight to the point, and this front end just doesn't feel like that to me. But overall, if it was any other brand, it would be a decent looking SUV. Nothing wrong with that. I think the side view is probably my favorite view of this, because you can see just how stretched out this design is. It feels long and it feels pretty sleek when you look at this from a side view. And then we have nice muscles going over the rear axle, and we also have a slight curvature over the front axle with this very sloping roofline up top, looking pretty cool. I also like the integration of the taillights in the back a lot better than the headlights that we have in the front. And you can see that they tried to reduce the visual weight as much as possible. First of all, by black out the top section. The greenhouse is all black. Kind of removes the volume in the top, and then you can see the lower section. We have a thick piece of probably plastic in the lower section here, cutting out some more mass in the lower section, creating this more nimble feel for this car. And these, they say these are 22-inch wheels, but these look a lot bigger than 22s, or not, maybe not a lot, but they look more like 23s on this specific car. I do like the wheel design. So these are not typical EV wheel design where they're all covered up. You can't even see the brake calipers and the rotor in the back. This has some traditional looking wheels on it, which looks fantastic. And the rear end, this looks great. I think this design in the rear end with this almost carved out portion, and then you have a simple one-line light bar with the Lotus underneath it. I think this design in the rear, this is more Lotus to me, because this is way more straight to the point, way more elegant looking than the front end, which looks way too busy for me, specifically with the patterns that we have in the lower section that we just talked about. Then moving into the interior, so you do know that EVs these days, they have a pretty simplistic interior in most cases. They all pretty much look the same, which is a shame, because I think interior designs, that's where you're going to spend the most time inside of the car, and that's where the designers can really take advantage of adding some identity to the specific brand that you're working on. However, today it feels like everything is just morphing into one single style, and that is the exact style that we have here as well, because we do have a big 15-something screen in the middle, and then you have a small gauge cluster right here with some ambient lighting going around it and horizontal lines all over the place. However, the article said that it does have some physical buttons for the climate control, and I'm guessing that those are located down here in the bottom maybe? They don't have any labels on them, so I'm not entirely sure. These looks like toggles for the climate control settings, so probably down there. You also have the wireless charging looking like in there. Steering wheel looks pretty decent for an EV. It does have some personality to it with the styling that we have going on here, with the blacked out Lotus logo in the middle. You also have the pedals in the back, probably for the regen braking. So overall, as I said, this is not a bad looking SUV. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is an ugly SUV. It just doesn't feel Lotus to me, and I'm gonna show you exactly why right now. So let's pop into this slide. This new Lotus Eletre, what this looks like to me is a combination of these two cars that we have down here. At the very bottom, we have the Neo ES7, I believe this is called, and this is a Chinese EV SUV, and this one doesn't need any introduction. This is, of course, a Lamborghini Urus. And looking at these two, if we morph these two together, the thing you would get is exactly the styling of the Lotus Eletre. It's kind of amazing to see this. And that's what the problem with Lotus is. They moved completely away from their identity and just mixed and matched all kinds of styles, specifically in the front end. Look at these fins that goes up here, similar, almost exact same angle that we have in the Urus. And this cut line at the top, we also have that coming back in the Urus. But this Lotus is a lot more smooth than the Urus. So let's take the Urus and add some smoothness to it, and also split the headlights. So we have the daytime run light up top and the main headlights in the bumper, like we have in the Neo down here. And boom, you have this design. And the thing with Lotus, it's not supposed to look like a Chinese SUV EV. That's my problem with this design. So let's talk solutions. What would be the solution for Lotus here? I think personally that they should have gone with a hybrid version, because what that would have done is removed some of these super smooth and bubbly shapes that we have in this specific EV, and instead they could have implemented a little bit more of their identity into this design, because they're not chasing that drag coefficient 0.26 number that they needed to get with this specific EV. Even if it was just a 4-cylinder with a, say, 48-volt hybrid system, that would still have some plenty performance, and you would still be allowed to work more with the design to make it more Lotus. But that's just my opinion.